back when I was still in excavating or when we started Alcove development 10 years ago. The infrastructure cost per lot would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $20,000. Just the infrastructure itself, $15,000 to $20,000. Now those costs are somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $60,000.
Wow. Over a 10-year period.
Over a 10-year period.
That's an astronomical jump. Like, that's crazy.
We only have a couple of levers to pull when we're trying to get the total lot price down.
Yeah.
Because it's a factor that goes into housing costs.
Yeah, and making it affordable.
And making it affordable.
Welcome to Lawrence Real and Local, Keeping It Real podcast presented to you by the Lawrence Board of Realtors. We're your go-to source for all things real estate in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm Lexie Haskin with Bank Midwest.
And I'm Patrick Dipman with McGrew Real Estate. Together, we are here to make the journey to home ownership a breeze. Join us as we share insider insights, expert advice, and a dose of fun along the way.
This episode was brought to you by...
Insurance can feel complicated, but getting the right coverage doesn't have to be. I'm Ryan Spark, owner of the Spark Agency with Farm Bureau Financial Services.
And I'm Thea Lease, Senior Account Exec at the Spark Agency. Since 2013, we've helped families and businesses in Lawrence make confident insurance decisions.
We're proud of the long-term relationships we've built and being there when clients needed us most.
Call us at 785-841-0073 for a simple, no-pressure review. We'd love to help.
Welcome to Lawrence Real and Local, Keeping It Real podcast by the Lawrence Board of Realtors. My name is Lexie Haskin with Bank Midwest.
And I'm Patrick Dipman with McGrew Real Estate.
And we are joined here today with Dustin Baker with Alcove Development. Welcome.
Well, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get to what you're doing? What's your background? What do you like to do for fun even?
Well, to start with, I grew up around this area. Actually grew up down the road east of here in DeSoto. Mm-hmm. Born and raised, went through high school there. Out of college, I took a banking job. So I was in banking for about 10 years and really focused on construction and development lending. So that's what kind of led me down this path. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of my customers doing what I'm doing now. So a lot of my mentors I had along the way were my customers, and just got to pick their brain, how this industry works. It's changed a lot over time, mm-hmm. but a lot of the mechanics are the same. The numbers are bigger. The risks are greater today. The margins are smaller. So it's a great business to be in from that model, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so when I got done with, I got out of banking right as the Great Recession was occurring. It really wasn't fun to be in banking at that time. And
what?
Yeah, it was. It was a great time to be in real estate in general at that time. I mean, everything was just in mass chaos. But so I then took a job with a company here in Lawrence. That's what led me to Lawrence, in North Lawrence, Pine Landscape Center. Mm-hmm. So I was Brian and Kathy's Pine's CFO for 3 years. Still great friends with them today. During that 3 years, just really developed a lot of Lawrence friendships. And after 3 years, I ended up taking a job with R.D. Johnson Excavating. And there I was kind of a jack of all trades. I helped mainly in the office, became their business development person. And then when we ended up selling, as a lot of people know in the Lawrence market, R.D. Johnson Excavating sold in 2016. And then that's when we started Alcove Development with Roger Johnson, who owned R.D. Johnson Excavating at the time, and his son, Jeremiah. And we were all three founders of Alcove mm-hmm. Development in 2016.
The Three Musketeers.
The Three Musketeers, yes. Yes.
So Dustin is joining us on our special series that we're doing with it, how cities are kind of developed, what goes into it. Because a lot of people are like, just get this done. So today we're focusing a lot on utilities, infrastructure, and what you don't see behind the neighborhood growth. I know we haven't had a ton of neighborhood growth in Lawrence over the past few years, which we can talk about that in a little bit, but even just in Douglas County in general, what goes into it or what goes into it in the first place. But from your perspective, a developer's perspective, why is infrastructure one of the most important and maybe misunderstood parts of the growth?
Well, first off, when you're talking about developing, that's infrastructure is really the key component of a development. When we think about just residential development in general, if there wasn't infrastructure, we'd be all drilling wells and having lagoons in our backyard, right? So that's part of the infrastructure is part of what makes a city versus out in the country. So when a developer is looking at a site to develop in town, how close infrastructure is, meaning, and we can get into what infrastructure is, the definition of infrastructure is, but how close infrastructure is really is the key component to if that development is if that piece of property is going to be a viable project. The development itself, meaning the houses and infrastructure within the piece of land that the developer is looking at, cannot really afford to pay for the bringing of a lot of the utilities at a great distance. So they have to be relatively close to make the project an economic viable project for a developer.
Yeah. Because, if you have land that's pretty decently far out of town and then nobody in the middle is willing to budge with their land that want to get developed, you would still have to get everybody's permission, correct, to just get the utilities through their land to even get it to a further thing. And that would even be really costly. So that it does take time to expand a city in general.
Well, if you were looking at an expansion, and it wouldn't have to even be in Lawrence, it could be in somewhere in Douglas County, like Eudora or Baldwin City. When you think about infrastructure, you're thinking about water, sewage, obviously electricity and gas too, but
Wi-Fi.
Well, that's another piece actually. That would be another piece
exactly.
Too.
Streets, curb, gutter.
So when you're thinking about whether a development would be viable, how do you go through the process to even get from like, hey, this is a piece of land that we could develop and could benefit the community, but we're right here right now. So what's that process typically look like for a developer? Well,
When we identify a piece of ground, like we're driving down the road a lot of times, or a realtor will bring us a piece of ground and say, hey, this we think that it might be a piece of property you'd be interested in. First thing we really do is, number one, there's only a certain price point that a piece of ground can be bought for to make it, again, a viable project. So depending on the price, and let's just assume the price of the land, which that's a big assumption right now. Land prices have increased quite a bit. But let's assume land price is taken out of the equation. One of the first things we look at is the future land use map of the municipality that we're exploring in. So in Lawrence, we'd look at the Lawrence future land use map and the comp plan and see if that piece of property matches up with what the city planners and the city council and the planning commission have determined that piece of property, the future use of that piece of property is. Because if we don't match up with that, let's say I wanted to do a residential neighborhood on a piece of property that the city has determined would be best used for industrial, I'm going to have an uphill battle right away. So that's first and foremost. And then secondly, we're looking at whether it's in a floodplain, the drainage issues, whether it has sufficient dirt meaning are we going to have to bring dirt in or are we going to have to haul dirt away? There's a substantial cost with that. And then after, if all those boxes are checked, then we're looking at the utility maps. And if, like, Douglas County has, and the city of Lawrence has a great utility map online that you can kind of do a quasi check and see how close the water, the sewer, the street infrastructure, see how close those are. And if all those boxes are checked, then you line up a civil engineering firm and engage their services to help you through some of the other processes. You set up a meeting with the city. You have some initial conversations. So there's always these step by step that you're kind of checking boxes along the way to see if any one of those things don't check off, then, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a dead end, but it's certainly you pause and you try to figure that out and then move on.
Yeah. And then sometimes it comes down to, well, who's going to pay for this?
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And that's another piece I was thinking was if you identify, like, let's say the city's vision for expansion is in this area, but you're like, well, there's no water running that direction, or there's no plan for sewage. Like, how are we going to figure that out? I know for me, if I help a client buy a piece of land, I can call rural water department there and say, is there a water meter available?
Right.
But we're not talking about one property. We're talking about like an actual development.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So how early in the planning process does it get addressed? Is it just the first thing that gets addressed then with the utilities and the infrastructure?
I mean, it's one of the very first things that we're looking at. Like, I mean, literally the day that I'm getting a phone call or I'm identifying a piece of property, those boxes that I just kind of described are all checked pretty much in the first day. It's like if infrastructure, let's say, is half a mile away, let's say sewer is half a mile away and water is half a mile away, that's probably not something that I would be interested in because I just can't afford to get infrastructure to my site because I know I'm already going to have to pay for all the infrastructure on my site.
Yeah.
So that's yes, early on in the process.
Early on. Yeah, I'm just a lot of people just don't even understand that. Just build a house there, get a neighborhood up.
If you wound up finding a piece that the infrastructure was there, how do you go through that process then as far as I mean, I know you talked about you'd meet with the civil engineer and then probably city just kind of planning as far as that goes. But let's say you got a neighborhood. How do you figure out where to lay things out? Yeah,
you're relying a lot on the professionals. So the civil engineer will present. You give your engineer kind of the parameters that you're looking for, right? Density of meaning how many lots are you looking for on a piece of property, what the size of the houses that you're anticipating building. So you need to provide that type of information up front to your engineer. Then from there, they're looking at the water runoff that will be generated by that type of density. And so they're doing their calculations. Then they're coming up with, okay, how are we going to mitigate? First and foremost, how are we going to mitigate the water that will be generated from the site? Because one of the premier things that we have to be concerned about is we can't have our water go off onto somebody else's property, right? When we're developing it. So that's one of the first mitigating points that we're looking at from the engineering perspective is how are we going to deal with the water? Then from there, they're laying out the site, the civil engineers laying out the site with those parameters in mind. And then we're talking about, is the sewer tap going to be on the front or the back of the lot? And that's usually driven by the municipality's requirements. And so they're looking at the specs and the requirements of the city. And then they're trying to lay out the plat based on that. From there, once the engineer has all that done, then that's your first pass at looking at it. Then I'm making some tweaks, say, well, that lot isn't necessarily a viable lot. Let's say, they come up with a configuration that has a triangle lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very narrow in the front. That's probably not a lot that's going to be buildable.
That would be such a crazy lot to try and build on. Okay, sorry, going off on a side tangent.
Yeah.
What is the wildest shape of lot that you've seen or had to work with?
Well, some of the engineers come up with some crazy lots, but we try not to not to have some wild and crazy.
Yeah,
they're usually pretty
standard.
Pretty standard. Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, I'm like, if I'm even just looking at like the GIS map, and then sometimes they have them all drawn out like online, and you'll look at it and you think, why? Why did they do that?
Yeah. Just trying to get as dense as possible, but sometimes the most dense design isn't the best design. You're better off just having some really nice green space and add that really weird looking lot to another lot, the next door lot, and just make that lot a little bit bigger.
So when you're trying to figure out the water runoff, stormwater, what are some options that you look at?
So a detention pond would be one. Sometimes not really necessarily in residential development, but sometimes on some commercial development, we're looking at underground water detention, and then the just normal storm sewer management tying into and then sometimes you're looking downstream. Is there a way to you're wanting to release that water off your site at a reduced flow, and what is downstream from you that you're releasing into. And sometimes that might mean that you have to go downstream, get an easement to go into, let's say, another somebody else's detention pond and make their detention pond bigger. We've had to do that in the past where maybe there wasn't as much capacity downstream as we needed, and we had to go work with that landowner, get their permission, pay them, pay them an easement royalty, and go in there and do improvements on their property so we could develop.
That's what I was wondering is, how often and the possibility of potentially having to do improvements to make it work for the new development.
Yeah. We're always having to, it's amazing how much money and time and energy goes into storm water management, but it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're planning infrastructure for a new neighborhood, how do you balance that between the current demand and then the future growth that comes along with just planning in general?
Well, we're looking at, this process of developing is at least before you actually see a house go in a development, it's at least probably a 4-year time period that developer has started that project. So by the time you go through all those due diligence checklists, meet with the city, get the land purchased, go through the platting process, which takes a lot of time, and then finally get to a point where you're putting in the infrastructure and then getting the infrastructure installed and then selling that lot to a builder or building on it yourself, that's a 4-year time period. Yeah. So going back to your question, how do you balance that demand? We're having to project out what that demand is over at least a 4 or 5 and sometimes a 10-year horizon, because that's how long that whole process can take for us to sell our last lot in the subdivision. Yeah. So we're really looking at absorption. We're relying on realtors a lot to inform us of what demand is out there for the end buyer, and then we're trying to match that up. And it's part art, part science, really.
Have you been seeing it when you're making these plats and planning these neighborhoods, smaller lot sizes for these developments, or what are you kind of seeing or planning or the things you do?
Yeah. We're so Yeah, to answer your question, we are seeing, because, as I mentioned before, land value and land cost have risen so much, and infrastructure cost has risen so much. And give you, for instance, on that, back when I was still in excavating, or when we started Alcove development 10 years ago, the infrastructure cost for a typical lot density, of basically 65-foot wide lot in a subdivision. The infrastructure cost per lot in a typical subdivision would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $20,000. Mm-hmm. Meaning that doesn't include the land, that doesn't include the engineering cost, that doesn't include any interest carry cost, nothing. Just the infrastructure itself, $15,000 to $20,000. Now those costs are somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $60,000.
Wow. Over a 10-year period.
Over a 10-year period. And so that's
an astronomical jump. Like, that's crazy.
Like, super crazy.
Yeah.
And to even add on to that, back when I was talking about the Great Recession, part of that was developers went in and built a bunch of lots, right?
Yeah.
And so we had an excess amount of lots that were taken over by the banks, or another developer came in and bought really cheap lots. So we had to burn through all these cheap lots we didn't really get done burning through those lots, meaning building houses on them, until like almost COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, and so now you're going from really cheap lots or lots that were developed with about $15,000 or $20,000 per lot infrastructure cost to $50,000 or $60,000.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at new developments, we only have a couple of levers to pull when we're trying to get the total lot price down.
Yeah.
Because it's a factor that goes into housing costs.
Yeah. And making it affordable.
And making it
like
affordable.
That. Which at that point, it almost makes it a little impossible, potentially. Like,
it's really tough.
Really difficult. Yeah.
It's really tough because, there's, like I said, there's only so many levers that we can pull. If we want to buy the land value is the land value. I mean, there's some negotiating, right? We try to get the best price we can, but there's only so much land to go around that's near infrastructure, right? Yeah. And so one of the levers that we can pull, though, is to get more lots on that piece of land, which drives to your question about the size of the lots.
Yeah.
So what we're really seeing in the marketplace today is that 75-foot wide lot or 65-foot wide lot is really now down to, we're doing some subdivisions with 50-foot wide lots.
Yeah.
And then your side yard setbacks that you have are shrinking as also.
Yeah.
Some are down to 5 foot. In Eudora, we just got approved a subdivision that will probably start this year, Shadow Ridge North. And we have 50-foot wide lots with 7.5 yard side yard setbacks.
Yeah.
So trying to drive that price down.
I just had like this random thought come into my head. I always thought that it would be so fun to name a subdivision. Is that just not like a...
I don't like it because I'm not creative at all.
He's not creative. I don't even know what I'd name a subdivision, but then I just always think it'd be fun to like either name a street or name a subdivision. Yeah. And you get to do that all the time. It's like, you're like, yeah, it was cool the first couple times, but now... Well, like in Eudora, we have another subdivision that we just got approved last night, a preliminary plat, and it's called Holiday Woods, and it's named after the Holiday family in Eudora, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is.
But other times I'm just not that.
Yeah,
I'm not creative, so I lean on the creative people, my marketing team to kind of come up with the cool names.
Oh, cool name.
Yeah.
I know people will sometimes be like, well, we don't need more apartments, but is that a role in which apartments are potentially cheaper to build up versus outward, just even factoring in the infrastructure?
Density.
Yeah. It all goes down to density on that piece of ground. And that's why, apartments are being proposed more and more. And we develop apartments too. And they have I say a really healthy city has everything, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Everything for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And apartments are one of those things. But yeah, a lot of what's driving that though is, especially like infill development, which is great. You have the infrastructure there, but a lot of times the land value then is
It's
so
really high.
great that you have
Yeah.
to get more dense to be able to do something with it.
So when you start building up and you start looking at that, do you have to also potentially look into air rights, or is that a thing? Or like, I just like the rights.
Well, in Lawrence, probably out by the airport, right?
Out by the airport, yeah.
But I haven't really had to deal with air rights
But, like-
too much. But we've been doing garden style apartments, so the highest I've went is a 3-story apartment. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, you definitely like downtown Lawrence. If you wanted to build a 5-story,
Yeah.
apartment or something, you probably could have that potential.
Like run into that. And
yeah.
Yeah. That just came into my head. I think I'm watching a lot of sci-fi shows right now. Oh my gosh.
So you spoke a little bit earlier about the different utility companies and civil engineer. Obviously, you as a developer, city planning or county commissions, so are there other entities that are also involved that we're just overlooking in this conversation?
Yeah. The fire department is a big one. They're going to look at ingress, egress of your site.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to look at the turn radius of your cul-de-sacs and make sure they can get their fire trucks in and out. Evergy, your electric provider's gonna have a look at it. You mentioned gas, but depending on where you're at, it's a different gas provider. Yeah. So you're having to match up what they're wanting to do. Obviously, city staff has. When you put in a plan, it goes through an entire review process, and each of the departments within the city have a look at that and have their own review comments. That's kind of part of the reason it takes so long.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a whole game. And then, if you're financing it, you have to, have a banker look at it. A lot of all the reports that you're doing, like a phase 1 environmental study, you're looking at that. So there's a lot of people that touch the project.
It sounds like it. And I'd always heard, with like fire and police, there's like response times that they look at, but I hadn't even considered that today.
Yeah.
So
lots of people.
I know that we've talked about some costs already too, but I know that a lot of times taxpayers get really concerned on like what they're paying for and who's paying for what. At what point does it come into play? Like who is paying for it and how is that decided? Developers, the city, taxpayers? How does that all come about?
Well, normally it's normally the developer is responsible for at least all the infrastructure on the site.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about off-site improvements, it really is driven by what this particular project is doing with all of those off-site improvements. And I'm talking about like streets, are we adding a lot of traffic to this particular intersection? And are there things that we're going to have to, as a developer in that project, going to have to foot the bill for because we're causing? So it's really what are we causing versus what are we not causing?
Yeah.
And then on top of that,
whose fault is it?
And but then also we're all the other offsite improvements. Who's going to benefit from those? Sometimes it's okay. We're getting a sewer line extended, but because we're extending that sewer line to our property, it's going to open up a lot of other areas for development. Or so what is the public benefit versus what is the private benefit is really what everybody is trying to get down to the brass tacks and figure out.
Yeah.
And see who pays for what. And a lot of times it's just like, okay, let's get a study and let's sit down in a room and try to figure it out.
Yeah. You get all the smart people together and knocking them and oh my gosh. I just keep jumping all over.
That's
the place.
okay.
That's
that's
fine. That's good. Keeps it rolling.
A lot of good information here.
Yeah.
Keeps it rolling.
So are there any in this whole process, your 3 to 4 year process, like what are your biggest bottlenecks where you get slowed down or potentially stopped? Are there just some really specific ones, or once you get past one, does the floodgate just open?
Well, one of the biggest bottlenecks is honestly just getting through the planning process. And that means, not only just the review process and, there's a whole host of things that go into that. That takes a lot of time. It's a lot of back and forth. You get review comments back from, all the different departments. You're going to have to respond to them. That takes time. And granted, like what everybody sometimes doesn't realize, you can look at a calendar and know this, but until you actually have money on the line and you're trying to get a project done and you're spending 6 figures on engineering plans and all these studies and now you're getting delays because of this process. It's really, really concerning. It
can be very stressful.
It's stressful, but if you miss because of a review and that going back and forth, if you miss the deadline to get it turned back in to make that planning commission, let's say you miss it by 1 day, you've now missed a month, not a day.
Yeah.
You've missed a month. And that just slows down. So the biggest bottleneck is getting the official approval from planning commission and city council on your particular project.
I would assume based on city that probably changes a little bit too.
It does.
Okay.
It does. Yep.
So kind of going into the role of realtors when it comes to just understanding, why is it important for them to understand the infrastructure when they're just talking about growth and development in general?
Well, like I said before, it's really it's the underlying reason why development is development. If you don't have infrastructure, or you just have a piece of property that probably could just have one house. And like I said, we're back to drilling wells. So the way I look at it is, if you don't have infrastructure, it's really not development. And so with that, just if the realtors and you folks, I think there has been a lot of discussion in Lawrence over the past several years about infrastructure. And I think that's been a healthy discussion. But now with some of the CIP programs out there, and a push.
Will you say what CIP stands for?
I knew you were going to ask that.
Here, I have Google.
I know it's a planning process to spend infrastructure dollars. Yeah. I mean, essentially is what it is. So, but they've
capital improvement plan.
That's right.
That's
you learned. I've learned something new.
Capital improvement plan. You're like, I just know what the CIP is. Like,
yeah. So, but with that, now the city is dedicated extending some of the infrastructure to west of the bypass. So with that in mind, the reason we're talking about the development on the west of the bypass is all having to do with infrastructure. Yeah. Until we solved that problem, there was going to be no development.
Yeah, that's why this had a hard stop.
And so with no development, with no infrastructure extended, we're back to that loop that we're in right now of supply and demand and where we're at with supply and demand. It's all about that. We we're not generating enough supply to keep up with demand, thus prices go up.
And I think sometimes there's a misconception of I might see a church or I might see some sort of business out, and well, they're out there. What's taking so long? I'm thinking they're probably on septic.
Yeah.
That's what they are on.
Yeah, and rural water.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
or a lagoon.
Or a lagoon.
A
There you go.
lagoon. Do you want to hop into our fact or fiction segment?
You bet.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, did you rearrange the numbers
I
on
just
this
got
one?
rid of the first one. Everything else is in order. Number one, developers are often responsible for funding some or all of new infrastructure.
That's a fact. I would say primarily if you ask the city or if you ask any and I'm not talking about just Lawrence, just any municipality about their policy on infrastructure costs, they're going to say our policy is that that new development pays for new development, and that's pretty much everywhere I go. That's the case.
Yeah. Roads and utilities can always be added later if needed.
False or fiction or whatever you say. It's very difficult. I mean, number one, you're going to have to, there could be a house structure in the way. You're going to have to purchase easements. You're going to have to figure out, just false.
False.
Infrastructure planning considers both current and future population needs.
Definitely fact. That we're looking at a lot of times there's a housing study, and I didn't even go into that, but sometimes the developer will get their private housing study done. Sometimes we're relying on the municipality to have a housing study, and here in the last 5 years, the state of Kansas did their own housing study, so they're looking out and projecting not only now but in the future. In fact, a lot of times I'm also, when I am looking at a municipality to go into, first thing I'm doing is talking to the school district, because the school districts are constantly hiring consultants to look at the future impact of where they're at and what's in the pipeline for development. And so they're really looking at, okay, what are we seeing in the future 5-10 years down the line? So we're planning our capital and improvement plans. So I'm talking to the school districts first thing.
Yeah. So stormwater systems only matter during big storms.
Oh, definitely fiction. Yeah. I would say that like we initially talked about, stormwater is like one of the biggest things. Where the last thing I want to do is have somebody call me up in the middle of the night and blame my subdivision for their basement flooding. So and that can happen in any storm event. So we're very, very cautious of that.
Infrastructure delays are often caused by coordination and approval processes.
Fact that sometimes it's just sometimes it's not understanding the rules of engagement when it comes to the city process. Sometimes it's just getting to a certain point, and the concern is either traffic and you're having to work through all those processes and delays, and there's communication going back and forth. People are studying the issue. So that's where a lot of the delays come from, is just that entire process. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see just in general, people send me emails and did you look at that yet? I glanced at it, but I need to actually look at
exactly.
it.
It all takes time.
Everybody does that.
You're like, I saw it pop up on my screen. Just give me a second.
Yep.
Give me a second. Yes. Infrastructure decisions can affect housing affordability.
Most certainly fact. Like I was talking about before, if the infrastructure isn't there, you're probably not developing. Thus, the the supply and demand is getting out of whack, like the situation we currently have, versus the other thing is if I'm adding a lot of supply to the market, new supply that allows people to move up in their houses, then, then they're releasing that house to be able to be bought by somebody else. And anytime you're adding supply, whether it's on the high end of the market, the middle, the low, if you're adding supply, that causes a healthy supply and demand factor.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we're looking forward to having you on the panel.
Yeah.
And thank you to the Spark Agency with Farm Bureau Financial. They're sponsoring this series as well to help make this happen. And thank you to the Lawrence Public Library. Remember to like, subscribe, share, follow. Did I miss anything?
Leave a comment, even if it's a discussion comment.
Yeah, please don't be mean, though.
Nope.
We only positive or constructive.
That's right.
Okay, signing off.
Thanks for joining us on Lawrence Real and Local Keeping It Real podcast. We appreciate our guests taking the time to join us. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode.
For more information, please visit us on the web at www.lawrencerealtor.com. And remember, whether you are buying, selling, or simply dreaming of buying your future home, we're here to help. Until next time, keep it real.
And happy house hunting.